Uh, we were just talking about the fight that was going on between Trump and Elon Musk. And so I wanted to take a few minutes. I'm here with my nephew. He's 10 years old and he's going to be 11 next week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joe, do you want to say hi?
Hi, and Joe, and her nephew, and I'm also gonna be the editor for this
Yeah,
video.
and he's also going to help me edit the video. So I wanted to try to explain to him what was happening, why they were fighting, and just a little bit about the role that tax policy plays in our economy. So, do you understand what debt is? You do, right? Like,
Yeah, where you owe the bank money.
yeah, so like when your parents got this house or when I got my house, we like took out a loan with the bank to pay for it, or like when your parents use their credit cards to buy you stuff online, right?
So you
So,
have to like pay back the bank because you got a loan.
yeah, so we have like expenses as people, right? So like things that we need to live our life, like eat, travel, have a safe home and like comfortable to live in, our,
Mm,
food for our new puppy, right? And so you can pay for that stuff either through the income that you make in your job or by accumulating debt, right?
mm,
So our country is just like that in that
mm,
we have expenses, right? So like the school you go to, like you go to public school, right?
yeah.
So we pay for public schools, for public roads, but then also like to do things like help low income individuals or like
Mm,
people who can't afford to maybe feed their kids or have a safe home, right, to help them. So there's lots of reasons why we as a country have to pay for stuff. Some of
yeah.
that stuff is like war and things like that, which we don't
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's not as great, but it also important. So the role of taxes, do you know what taxes are? I know you
Yeah.
know that I work with taxes, right?
You have to pay them every year.
Yeah, so we as individuals and corporations as citizens of this country have to pay a portion of our revenue of our income back to the government. And the point of that is to fund those expenses, right? To pay for the roads, to pay for the schools, to help people who don't have enough money, things like that. Um, but if we don't make enough in tax revenue, then the government takes out loans, right?
Mm,
And so they build up a debt, just like we do as individuals.
yeah.
So do you know how much we have as a country in debt?
Mm-mm. I don't,
Any guesses?
um, a couple billion maybe?
That's a lot, but it's even more than that.
Trillion?
Yeah. You know how many trillion?
Two?
Over 36.
36?
Over 36 trillion.
I
I
wasn't even close.
know, that's crazy, right? It's such a big number. It's like it's hard to fathom, right? So that seems like we've been building that up for a really long time, right?
Mm,
But when I was about your age, you know what the deficit was then?
maybe a couple billion though.
In the early 2000s, we were actually operating at a surplus, meaning we didn't have any debt.
Oh,
We had more income than we had expenses. So it's not something that's been happening for a super long time, but over the last couple decades, we've been building this up. And sometimes it's for things like COVID. Remember how bad that was? That was like a lot of expenses to keep our country safe, right? And to keep people from dying. There's also
for the vaccines.
for the vaccines and everything. Yeah. So, and then there's been wars that we've been involved in. There's been social safety net programs that have gotten expanded. Do you know what that means? Like social safety net, that's like for the people who don't have enough money
To
to,
get vaccine.
well, no, just not even just vaccinations, but just to live, right? To make sure that kids don't go hungry, and
Yeah,
that, parents have safe homes and can like help raise their kids in like a good way, right?
yeah,
Um, so the problem is that a lot of the tax policy that we're working on now, rather than bringing in more income for these expenses, it's actually just increasing the debt, right? And
yeah,
that's because they are cutting more taxes than they're raising. But that doesn't have to be the case, right? So in 1986, which was like the last piece of big tax policy before Trump was in office last time,
hmm,
that was a piece of policy that they talked about for 3 years leading up to it. it was revenue neutral, meaning it didn't make the deficit bigger, and it was agreed upon on both sides of like Republicans and Democrats, right? So that's called being bipartisan or nonpartisan, right? When you can get both sides to agree on it. That seems pretty hard these days, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people fight about politics.
Do you think we're ever gonna pay off our debt, the
Well,
government?
I mean, that's kind of the hope is that we can at least bring it down to a reasonable amount, right? And so the problem is that this tax policy that we're passing now, do you want to know what kind of impact it has on the deficit?
Yeah.
Do you have any guesses?
Um, hmm. Maybe if there's another pandemic, we can't pay for any of the vaccines.
Yeah, and the other problem is if we get too much debt, then other countries and the people who are paying for our debt
Yeah, we're
might
not gonna have any
they're not going
allies.
to want to anymore, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, this piece of tax policy, okay, maybe let's back up for a second because I think the not only was the policy in 1986 revenue neutral, but there's been other tax policies since, like the Affordable Care Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. Like these aren't things that you'll understand, but I'm just saying that there have been other pieces of tax policy in the recent history that don't blow up the deficit in the same way. So it is doable, right?
Yeah.
But the problem with this time is that do you remember when Trump was president last time?
Yeah.
Yeah, but like
I
back
think
in
I was only like six
yeah,
years
you were
old.
pretty little, but you heard us talking about it,
Yeah.
right? And the tax policy that they passed when he was president the last time gave tax cuts to a lot of people, which people like, right? People like to pay less money.
Mm,
But it cut taxes for low income individuals, for middle income individuals, and a lot of tax cuts for really wealthy individuals and big businesses, like a lot. So the problem is that in order to keep the budget from blowing up back in 2017, they had to make all of those rules temporary, right?
yeah.
So they have to expire
Because the government would lose a lot of money.
because they would lose a lot of
Yeah.
money. Yeah. So they're expiring this year. So if we don't pass any tax policy by the end of this year, everybody's taxes are going to go way up. And that's going to make your dad and mom pretty unhappy, right? Like,
Mm,
not that we don't want to have low income individuals being taken care of, but it's just when you're kind of working to get by, you don't necessarily want to pay more taxes that you can't afford.
mm,
So the problem is that all of these provisions are going to expire, but we don't have the money to do it, right? This
mm.
policy, this bill is going to it's going to cost $4 trillion to extend all of those policies. That's a lot, right? Four
Yeah.
trillion bucks just to extend those policies.
And then they become even more debt.
But we're only cutting the deficit by 2 trillion. Do you know why?
Um, mm,
So we're going to cut out a lot of the social safety nets. Like we're going to reduce access to food benefits and health benefits for low income and disabled individuals to pay for these tax cuts. So that's not ideal, right?
yeah.
So the way I see it, there's three options, right? Either one, we let those tax benefits from 2017 expire because we can't pay for them, and then
Yeah.
everybody's taxes go way up.
Yeah.
Not great.
Yeah.
Two, we extend all of those tax cuts and we make our deficit even bigger at a time when things are already really shaky.
So it will be even bigger than this letting it expire.
Yeah, so if we let it expire, then we'll have more debt. And we'll like all of these low income individuals are going to lose access to medical care and to food. Like we love to eat, right? Like it would be really sad to not have enough money to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those neither of those options seem good, right? But there is a third option, and the third option is what we haven't really been talking about. And that is like extending some of the provisions, but not all of them, right?
Mm,
It's been like 8 years. You were just a baby when the last one passed, right?
mhm.
Um, but now we know how all of these rules have played out over the years because we've had 8 years to look at it.
Mm.
So we know the impact that these rules are having on our economy and on all the people. So we can use that information to determine which of those should get extended. Do you know how we decide? I don't think you know this.
Maybe a vote or something.
Well, a vote, but like not everybody knows how to figure out what's good and what's bad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, and some of the papers that I've read online, and then I think you're going to help me link in the video afterwards, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. They look at the tax policy in two ways, right?
Hmm.
There's progressive tax policy and regressive tax policy. Progress, right? Moving forward, it gets bigger. That's what progress means. So progressive
Hmm.
taxation means that as you make more and more money, you pay more tax, right? Because really wealthy people and really big businesses, not that
Yeah.
you don't want them to be successful, right?
Yeah.
When you work hard, you should be able to be wealthy and successful,
Hmm.
right? That's what we all want, right?
Yeah. Unless if it's somebody that just had rich parents and did all the work for
Yeah, well, that's the problem is
them.
it when you have a lot of money, it is easier to make more money and to pass your money on to your kids.
Yeah, because you can make a big business without having to like really start by a small
Yeah, you
business.
don't have to start from scratch. Exactly.
Yeah.
You're starting at a much higher point. That's
Yeah.
exactly right, you know? And so it's
Like
not that we
Amazon.
don't want them to be successful. Yeah, like Amazon. It's just that we need to give the tax benefits to the lower income individuals and not to as much to the higher income individuals because they already have a lot of help. Just like big businesses already have a lot of help, right?
Hmm.
Because they Jack, do you want to bring the puppy in at the end? I'll tell you when to bring her. Sorry, my nephew was coming out. So we don't need to give the benefits as much to the big businesses because it's easier to operate a big business, right?
Yeah.
You have, you know,
You can also pay more
yeah,
workers
you have
to do
more
the work
workers
for
on
you.
scale. Yeah, it just makes more money. So big businesses and wealthy individuals already get a lot of support from the system, right?
Yeah.
They're getting wealthy off of the communities in which they operate, the consumers that buy their stuff, right? They
Yeah.
already have a lot of support. So we want tax policy that is progressive in nature, meaning that we let the small income individuals and the working class people and the small businesses thrive and we give them a lot of support.
Yeah.
And then it's not that we stifled big businesses. We want to create an economy that helps everybody, but we just tax them more as you
Mm.
make more money because they can afford it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's progressive tax, right? Now, regressive tax is the opposite, right? So the
Yeah.
more money you make, the less you pay in income. That means that the
Yeah.
benefit, that the it's going to be inequitably harmful for low income individuals because the taxes are going to represent a bigger piece of their overall income, right?
Yeah.
So that's harder. So as a society, we generally want our tax system to be progressive. That's how we have like a healthy society, right?
And also part of it is inflation.
Yeah, inflation too plays a big part in our economy as well.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is go through these tax policies and figure out what's progressive and what's regressive. So things like increased standard deductions. I know you don't know what that is, but it means that we all got bigger tax deductions, which was good, right? We all
Hmm.
had lower rates, which was good. Things like the child tax credit. Your dad and mom got a bigger benefit just from having you and Jack
Yeah.
because the child tax credit got bigger and it also got refundable. And do you know what happened as a result?
We don't have to spend as much money on,
Yeah, not just you, but all the kids, all the
and
families,
there's
right?
also like senior taxes where you get like a discount because you're a senior.
Yeah, so those are the kind of things we
And
want to
also
do.
for
We
the
want to
military.
support military, we want to support low-income individuals, our vets, our
Yeah.
children, right? And the child tax credit expansion that happened brought 2.1 million children out of poverty. That's
Mhm.
a lot of
Yeah.
kids that are now able to like eat and live a safe, happy life.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So we don't want to get rid of those policies,
Yeah.
right? But then there's things like the increased exemption for death tax, which is when you die, you have to actually, if you and your mom, when you and your mom eventually die, they have to have $30 million before they get taxed on a penny. So it's it's
Mm.
it's a lot, right? I don't think they're going to die with $30 million. I'm sorry. But that means that you get a lot of money when they pass it on to you, which is good.
Yeah.
But that is definitely a regressive tax system, right? Because the people that die with the most amount of money find ways to pass that money on to their heirs. It's like this die, uh, borrow, buy, die. They borrow a lot of money, they use it up, and then they die, and then they pass on their income to their kids without having to pay taxes on it. So it just makes it a lot easier to build up wealth over the years. So
Yeah.
things like that, or reducing the tax rate for the highest income individuals, stuff like that. We could get rid of those provisions and still not harm, 80% of our population, right?
Yeah.
It's going to only impact the most wealthy people, which I think that's okay, right? Because
Yeah.
they've received so much from our society. So I'm not going to go into a lot more detail because I think you don't need to know all the different provisions. But the point is that this information exists, right? This research has been done. People are out there like me that do a lot of that freaking love tax policy, right? That
Yeah.
spend time reading all the papers and all the research. Like
She uses tax papers to wrap her present.
I do. And they do you read them before you open the presents?
Yeah.
Sure. So, there's people out there that love taxes and that are going to do this work and that have done this work. So it's just about passing smart tax policy. So saying no to this bill, right? Calling our Congress people, telling that this is bad policy, right?
Yeah.
It's going to harm a lot of people. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't pass good policy that helps everyone. And it could be nonpartisan. Like I always tell my students, I don't care if you're a Democrat, I don't care if you're a Republican, like tax policy shouldn't be partisan, right? It should be made in a way that makes everybody successful. If you
Yeah.
work hard, you should have tax policy that helps you grow, right? And helps
Hmm.
our country be economically successful. So
Hmm.
and that definitely exists, right? There has been tax policy in the past that both sides agree on. The other reason is not just because we all want to be happy, but because our president changes a bunch,
Hmm.
right? And so
Every
if
4 years.
yeah, so if your policy keeps changing, that volatility, changing back and forth is really bad for our economy because we can't plan, right? As
Yeah.
individuals, as businesses. And so it's really important that we figure out nice, stable tax policy that will work for everybody for a long time.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Do you have any questions?
I think you covered all my questions.
Here, come around. This is Peaches, our new puppy. Well, their new puppy, but I might take her home with me. And this is Jack. Okay, that's all.
Bye.
Bye.